Okay, so I'm Matt, and something a bit different today. Some team building style videos. Going to go through Sinister Cup as an example as to sort of how I might approach team building in a meta. And I'm joined by Lewis Shakercolt, who's a high level ace trainer from Manchester, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, Lee, same neck of the woods as Phil, Village in Bob.
Grand. Cool. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, yourself?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. Good. Now you were playing when Sinister was around. I think it was October. But I think it's fair to say you've come on a long way since then. Is that right?
Just a little bit. For the first season, I played, I think, 2 cups because my local community back then was around Bury sort of area, and not many people did PvP. And we did a couple of cups, and people lost interest, and so I had nobody to face, so I didn't really get a chance to play. And then when you all did All Stars in Macclesfield, and that was streamed, the only other PvP player in my area, Raspoons, went to that, and I saw he did quite well. He got to the last round. I think he faced Elfidel for the win, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And that piqued me interest up again. So when season 2 came back around, I jumped on the bandwagon again, and I jumped into Sinister Cup and realised how far behind I'd fallen everybody else.
Well, you seem to have made that ground back up again anyway. So that's
yes.
Yeah. What are your memories of Sinister Cup? So it's for those who weren't around when Sinister Cup was a thing. It was psychic, fighting, steel, and ghost with hypno, skarmory, and dark types banned.
It was a little bit RPS. There wasn't many safe switch options. Dusclops became the safe switch option, but I didn't have access to that because I'd only just started up with PvP again. So I struggled a bit because once I've got into a bad matchup, I had no way of getting out of it.
Sure. Yeah. I think you're right. Dusclops became a great safe switch, and I think the ghosts in general. I think it was very RPSy, as you say, between the psychics, the fighters, and the steels. So we sort of towards the end of the month, we saw people running triple ghost teams just so they didn't have to deal with that RPS. That RPS nature. And it's also worth pointing out as well that this cup was released well before Galarian Stunfisk. It was before Registeel got lock on. It was before others. Just looking down the list now, before things like Golurk, which could be big. It was before Berserker, which is coming up highly ranked on the custom search here. It was before the Wild Charge boost, which might make things like Raichu and Magnezone more viable.
I think Golurk was actually around, but it was before the Mudslap buff, so it wasn't anywhere near as highly ranked as it is now.
Sense. Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. And I think what was interesting back then was the main steel types were Steelix and Bastiodon. Bastiodon was really good at walling the ghosts, but was a sitting duck versus the fighting types. But Steelix was less good against the ghosts. I think notably Dusclops could overcome it, and Alolan Marowak could overcome it if it got baits. But it had the Earthquake to hit the big fighting types like Medicham and Poliwrath for some serious damage. I think now in Galarian Stunfisk we've got something that's a bit of the best of both worlds. Because it's so bulky and it's so fast, like Steelix couldn't quite beat all the ghosts all the time because it was slow to get there with Dragon Tail, and Dragon Tail wasn't starved. And I think Stunfisk looks like well, certainly for the sake of this video at least, I think it's where we should start. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this as if I was building a Sinister Cup team, and Lewis is here to help me bounce ideas off, and he's going to play devil's advocate to any questionable decisions I might make. I've not really thought this through in advance. I've got a few ideas, but we'll see where it goes. So let's get stuck in. So as I say, I think I want to start with Galarian Stunfisk. I think it's the steel type that looks like it might do its job the best. Certainly on on my PV poke list from the custom rule sets that I've got set up. It comes out at number 2, sorry. So I want to start there, and I can see it being a popular pick with other people as well. The fighting types that are the sort of counters to the main counters to Galarian Stunfisk being a steel type, and it's, as you were saying, it's a bit RPS-y. And so what I want to try and do early doors is I want to try and find something that's non-fighting type that can take on Stunfisk. So if I'm facing my opponent's Stunfisk, I don't want to. I've got options to beat it. I don't necessarily. I'm not forced into running the fighting type. Any thoughts as to things you might fancy for that role?
Looking down the list.
And Golurk stands out as a potential one, but I don't want 2 ground types, I don't think.
Ideally not. Gallade is a pseudo fighter, but it'd be tricky to run.
Yeah. So one that jumps out to me is Theraphorn, with the grass typing. With Power Whip and with Bullet Seed and Power Whip, it's going to beat the Stunfisk. It's going to be close because Stunfisk will be able to hit back hard with Earthquakes. And of course, Galarian Stunfisk is Steel type as well as Ground, so the Power Whips aren't super effective. But Theraphorn is a fairly positive matchup there. So that's something I might look to include on my team. And I've got to be careful because I'm at double fighting here, double steel type here. So that weakness to the fighting types is quite prominent already.
Yes.
So even at this early stage, I might be thinking about double psychic or double ghost to try and offset that weakness. Another interesting option would be something like Empoleon.
That's what I was looking down my list for. I don't think it actually beats Galarian Stunfisk though.
Oh really? Wow. Well, that's run the sim.
Because obviously it's steel type. It's not. Water doesn't resist ground, does it?
No.
So with its steel typing, it actually takes super effective.
Yeah.
Earthquake.
Yeah. As you say, if Stunfisk lands that Earthquake, it's chips for Empoleon. So yeah, Empoleon perhaps not the best solution there then. Probably one of those where if you double shield Empoleon, it'll be solid, but perhaps don't want to commit to doing that every time.
Yeah.
As something I used with some success first time round was Slowbro with Water Gun. So I'm just going to run the sim on that one, see how that one comes out. Slowbro. Let's go Water Gun Ice Beam for the sake of not winning Water Pulse. Oh wow! Even with Water Gun and Slowbro, Stunfisk will still come out on top if it gets baits.
Wow.
Which seems a bit ridiculous to me. If I add Water Pulse into that equation, doesn't make a huge deal of difference. This looks to me then. This looks to me then that there isn't a great deal that can take on Galarian Stunfisk outside of the fighters. So I think that might be that might mean that Theraphorn would be somewhere I'd go with that.
Yeah.
Just because it seemed fairly safe. So then thinking about if I've got Theraphorn as one counter to Stunfisk, I want something else to counter Stunfisk that has different weaknesses to Ferrothorn. So I could use them in there's different counters in different situations.
Yeah.
So I guess with Ferrothorn's weakness to fire and fighting, I guess actually Slowbro might be a good option. Even though it requires, even though Stunfisk can beat it if it gets the bait. If it doesn't get the bait, Slowbro will still take it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, just checking the sims. Yeah, Slowbro can win comfortably actually if Stunfisk doesn't go for the bait. So I quite like the idea of pairing Slowbro with Ferrothorn. And then let's have a fighter in there as well to try and as a sort of more solid counter to Stunfisk. What are your thoughts on the fighters here? Which fighters were you running back in Sinister?
First time round I ran Medicham, and then when we were building teams for Battle of the Servers, so that was a different meta for every round, and we got knocked out before Sinister, but we had to submit our Sinister teams first, and I had Medicham again in there, but I also had Poliwrath.
You went double fighters?
I went double fighters, yes.
Nice. So yeah, so Medicham has that with the psychic type in there, it beats the other fighters, which is always nice, having the top thing in its own sort of category. Poliwrath, with it being a water type, had a much better matchup against Marowak.
Yes.
What moves were you running on Poliwrath? Can you remember?
I ran Bubble.
Bubble.
Mainly for the Marowak. It does allow it to beat the Marowak, whereas the Mudshot doesn't.
Yeah.
Because you have to run Hydro Pump otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the Poliwrath has some nice versatility about it, because as you say, you can run Bubble to beat Marowak, or you can run Mudshot and Ice Punch, because then that way round, running it that way, you can beat Drifblim.
Yes.
So I guess something versatile like Poliwrath's always got a shout of being involved. It's the sort of thing. It's a good sixth pick. Like it's the sort of thing where after you've picked 5 things, you can look back at your team and pick out your weaknesses and think, well, if I've got this weakness, if it turned out you were a little weak to steel types and a little weak to Marowak, you'd pick it and you'd run the bubble set. Or if it turned out that you were weak to steel types and a little weak to Drifblim, we could run the Ice Punch set. Or it's just got that sort of niche coverage about it.
Yeah.
But I think in this instance, I think the Medicham shout might be better, purely because of having I've got the 2 steel types already in Stunfisk and Ferrothorn, so I'm looking quite weak to fighting types. So I think Medicham's ability to take on the other fighters as well is quite exciting in this instance. What moves did you have on?
The only other fighters to consider would possibly be Primate, with its ability to have Night Slash. You then have something to counter the ghosts that counter it. But then obviously you lose the Medicham matchup.
Yeah, I mean it could be a consideration to run both for sure.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, as you said, Night Slash being super effective and really spammy could be a really good option. And a thing to note here as well is that so it's got Cross Chop, which is Legacy. I actually do have a Legacy Cross Chop Primate, which makes it a bit more usable, because if you don't have Cross Chop, you're running Close Combat, which will give you the debuffs. I mean, it's an incredibly hard hitting move, but the defense debuffs on something that's already super frail like Primate is it's a risky play. So what moves were you running on Medicham?
On Medicham, I was running counter Dynamic Punch and Ice Punch.
Yeah, I think that's the moveset I'd prefer. Dynamic Punch just allows you to punch through the steel types much faster. And as we've discussed, as we mentioned earlier, things like Steelix and Galarian Stunfisk, if they get an Earthquake on you, they're going to hurt. So if you can try and avoid that by doing big damage, I think Dynamic Punch is definitely there as a good option. It's PV Poke's bringing up Power Up Punch as a suggested move. We all know it has its merits, especially when paired with something like Counter. And after a couple of Power Up Punches, Counter is just destructive. However, I think in this meta where there's a lot of Ghost types running about, I'm not sure Power Up Punch is the correct move to have.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, at that point, you sort of at the point of running Power Up Punch is you relying on your counter damage or your fast move damage, and you can't rely on that versus Ghost types. So
no, if your opponent brings in a Horn, so it doesn't matter how many Power Up Punches you've got, you're still not going to win that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Ice Punch and Psychic, I think they're both options. I think if you're running Dynamic Punch, I think it's nice to have Ice Punch there as well because it's less energy, so it can work as a bait if you need it. Also super effective against Drifblim, which is a potential issue. Certainly, there's not much in this meta that can take Shadow Balls. So things like Drifblim with Hex and Shadow Ball that can get to those Shadow Balls quickly are an issue. Problem with Ice Punch is that you've got nothing to hit Marowak. So if you wanted to run Medicham and have something from Marowak, maybe you could run Psychic instead. But I think I'm not too fussed about Marowak here because I've got my Slowbro and I've got my Stunfisk, which will the Stunfisk will probably take Marowak on fairly okay. So yeah, I think I'd be inclined to go Ice Punch, Dynamic Punch here. So what are we at now? We're at Medicham, Galarian Stunfisk, Slowbro, and Firethorn. So we've got a Steel, we've got a Fighter, we've got a Psychic. So Ghost. Which was your preferred Ghost? Because I know you were saying that you didn't have a Dusclops. What were your thoughts on the Ghosts?
So first time round, I didn't actually run a Ghost because I didn't have access to a Legacy Haunter, I didn't have Dusclops, so I just sort of had to make do with what I had. Second time round, I had access to a Shadow Ball Haunter, Shadow Claw, so that's what I ran.
Right, yeah, Haunter, absolutely devastating Pokemon.
Yes,
if you can time it right and farm something down and get a few with Shadow Claw and get a bit of an energy lead, absolutely devastating. And I think when I look at the team I'm in the process of assembling, it's looking fairly weak to Marowak. So I think having a Ghost type that can outpace Marowak with the fast moves like Haunter would be able to do could be quite crucial. So it's definitely up there as an option for this team. Drifblim I've spoken about. I'm a big fan of Drifblim, so that's something I'll be considering. Looking down the list, there's not really a huge deal of options otherwise. Dusclops, as you say earlier on, back when Sinister Cup first came out, it was a huge safe switch option. Personally, it's a bit passive for my liking. I'd rather. I ran Drifblim first time round and used that as a sort of save switch in the same way that Dusclops was, and it worked fine for me. So I'm on a personal level, I'm not going to be including Dusclops as an option. I think for me it's between Haunter and Drifblim. So on the basis that I'm looking a bit weak to Marowak, I'm just going to have a look what Marowak's matchups are like versus Haunter and versus Drifblim, just so I can assess which one's better. There are differences there between Haunter and Drifblim, but through the process that I've gone through so far, I've been able to identify Marowak as an issue. So for me, that's going to be a deciding factor as to which of the two I'm going to prefer. So let's have a look. Marowak. So I don't know about you, but when I'm running sims and preparing sims, I like preparing for the sort of worst case scenario. So I'm going to assume that the Marowak's going to bait, and I'm going to assume that I'm not going to bait. Although I guess with Haunter I'd be able to go straight Shadow Punch, so I'm going to assume that I'm not going to use Shadow Ball.
Yeah.
And it looks like Marowak really struggles to beat Haunter. On my screen it's saying Marowak wins shields down, but that's because my sim doesn't have Shadow Ball on it. If I put Shadow Ball on it and turn baiting on. Oh. Right, so this is interesting. So if Marowak gets a Bone Club off on Haunter, that will happen before Haunter gets to a Shadow Ball, which could be crucial here, because Haunter being the poison typing as well is weak to ground.
Yes.
Driftblim being a flying type, that all of a sudden becomes a much riskier bait. Yeah, Bone Club's going to do very little to Driftblim. 16 damage out of 208 HP. That's mad. So Marowak beats Driftblim with baits. But not without it, I don't think. Yeah, not without it, because Hex is faster than Fire Spin. But I think, based on what we were saying about how people use Haunter, I think if you're going to use Haunter, you're going to be aware that you need to save a shield for it.
Yeah.
So I think I'm leaning towards the Haunter side of this particular discussion. So that's Stunfisk, Medicham, Haunter, Slowbro, and Ferrothorn. I should really have got a list up here somewhere of where to save these, but it's a new type of video, still learning. Going down the list of on PvPoker of the meta, is there anything that stands out as a bit of a threat that I've perhaps not covered particularly well?
Golok possibly, because its Mudslaps will hurt Haunter hard. Your only real answer to Golok would be Ferrothorn at the moment.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Mudslap being super effective on the Stunfisk as well, and the counters from Medicham doing very little. Slowbro will be able to take that on, but wouldn't want to take a Shadow Punch.
No.
So yeah, so if my only answers to Golok are if my only answers there are Ferrothorn and Slowbro, which both are going to struggle against Ghost types. What I need in this last slot then perhaps is something that can take on Ghost types and Golok. That could be something to look out for.
Yeah.
Just running down the list as well, just for any other potential things that I might struggle against. Cresselia. Slowbro and Ferrothorn will take that on nicely. As will Stunfisk, so Cresselia is perhaps not a big issue there. Yeah, I think the things that sort of Driftblim and Dusclops are possibly problematic. So I think it's looking like something that can take on Golok and Ghost types could be the way forward. Now, in this meta, Dark types are banned, which would be the standout option for taking on Ghost types. I don't think there's a great deal of normal types. Oh, of course,
No.
Girafarig. Have you stumbled across a Girafarig at all?
No, I haven't. I know a couple of people that have tried to run one and didn't have that much success doing so.
Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it, where if you embrace the RPS nature of this and you want to go for it, then Girafarig will do a job against the normal type. But God, if you get it stuck up against anything else, you're going to struggle. Like even against Medicham, I'll open the sim. It doesn't do great against Medicham because it's it's suggesting Primate here or Battered Primate. Because Medicham's part psychic as well, so the confusions aren't doing super effective, and the counters are doing neutral. Yeah, Medicham beats Girafarig comfortably. So that's not good as a potential option. So Golek, it's saying here its key losses are Cresselia, Ferrothorn, Lugia, Dusclops, and Drifblim. That doesn't really help me because none of those really want to be taken on the ghost types. So this could be tricky, actually. This could be really tricky. I wonder about Bite Mawile. Because Bite Mawile...
It would do very well against the ghosts, but your Golok matchup would be hit and miss because of the steel typing.
Yeah, because those mud slaps will do a lot. Let's just run the sim, see how that works out. I think so. Mawile has power up punch as well, like Medicham has. Combined with a fast move like Bite, which does a load of damage. You're looking at a similar sort of play style to power up punch Medicham there.
Yeah.
I think PV Poke likes Iron Head as the second move. I like Play Rough. Just because if you are going to get to one big move, which you might do with Bite, you'll certainly only get to one. You kind of want that damage to be super effective against the things you're weak to. So
yeah,
let's have a look. Oh, it's very close. So Golurk wins shields down, but as long as Mawile shields once, it looks like it can just pull through. So it's an option. Not a great... Oh, it's very close, though. It's very close. If you go straight bites, you come out with 2 HP. So I bet if Golurk goes straight Mud Slap.
Rather than firing.
Yeah. Yeah, that... Oh, no, you still come out okay. So Mawile is an answer if it really has to be. Doesn't look like a great answer at the minute, but it could be. Well, I wonder if having Shadow Mawile changes any of that. Let's have a look.
The bite damage, possibly.
So it looks like the defense drop is costly. Is too costly. So it looks like a standard Mawile is better. Oh dear, this isn't looking good. Should we try Empoleon in there? Similar issue to Mawile in that it's going to be doing super effective fast move damage, but not great against the opposing fast move either. Yeah, again, it comes out with a slither of health. However, I think that looks like a better option than Mawile because if you're coming out with a bunch of energy, enough energy to throw one charge move, you're wanting to get a shield off that. And something like Empoleon with Hydro Cannon is going to going to force that shield rather than a power it punch off Marlisle.
Yeah.
And with Waterfall and Hydro Cannon, I mean that's going to take on Marowak nicely. I'm sure. And with Empoleon's defensive typing, it's going to mean that things like Driftblim aren't going to want to go for the Icy Wind bait. So let's turn baits off and see. Yeah, Empoleon beats Driftblim quite. Oh no, that's Drifloon. Driftblim. Empoleon beats Driftblim comfortably. Yeah. Although with a bit of energy, Driftblim can turn that round. So maybe not great. So problems like this as well, like now I'm struggling to find a counter for ghost types, including Golurk. That might be something you look to build a team around as well. I think it's always interesting to know that if I'm finding a hole that I can't quite cover against, it's quite probable that other people are going to have similar issues. I find it can be a really good way of building teams, figuring out what you really struggle against, and what there aren't answers to, and then running that. I think in this instance, it's not going to be what I want to do, but because as I say, I think Galarian Stunfisk is really good here and is what I want to run. But yeah, struggling here.
The other option I'm thinking of is Persica.
Right, talk to me about this, because this was something I think is a really exciting option actually.
So Shadow Claw would obviously help with all the ghosts. I would imagine it would probably beat all the ghosts because of that, with access to foul play as well. The Golurk matchup, again, you'd have the issue with it being steel typing, and the Mud Slaps are going to probably do too much to actually win that, but Shields Down probably would win. Because you would get to a foul play before they would get to any sort of charge move.
Yep, called that right. Yeah, Berserker wins Shields Down. And I think, I don't know about you, but if you're in situations where you'll win some shield scenarios but not others, I think winning the Shields Down situation is always the one I'd favour, because that way I know I can force a shield. Well, I guess it varies, but I think in a situation like this, where certainly where the Shadow Claws are going to do a chunk of damage to Golurk, I think that's a really solid matchup to be in actually. So yeah, I think that's a cracking shout, mate. Looking
You've
at
also got the option if you switch in Persica and they switch in their Golurk with an energy lead, you're still probably going to lose, but you might force one or both shields doing it that way as well.
Yeah, and what's also nice is the other move is Close Combat, which we know is an absolute beast of a move. Your opponent, it's a fairly new Pokemon. Your opponent might not be completely familiar with it. Might bring a Bastiodon in or a Registeel in, thinking they can just out tank it. They're not going to want to take that Close Combat. So yeah, I think that could be a really good shout actually. And especially considering that the steel type I have on my team already is, well, I've got two of them. I've got Stunfisk and Ferrothorn, and neither of them are particularly great at taking on ghost types, which is kind of what you want your steel type to be able to do. You want it to be able to take on the ghosts and the psychics here. So yeah, with the Shadow Claw damage from Berserker paired with foul play, I think that's probably about as good as we get. Just having a look down the list just to see if there's any other things that stand out, but I really don't think I'm going to find anything better than that.
The only other possible thing to consider, though I've never actually ran this, so I'm not sure how it would go, would be a feint attack Dusclops rather than a Hex one, giving you the dark damage. I'm not sure how that would
work
or not.
But I think Hex is still super effective, isn't it? I think I'd want to stay away from Dusclops, knowing that I've already got Haunter. But yes, certainly something I could consider. There aren't really many flying types in this, are there?
Not with what's been banned, no. Because Skarmory is obviously an individual ban. That's the only real flying type that.
Yeah, Skarmory would be perfect. There's Drift Blim, which could be a potential pick there, but I think it'll have a fantastic matchup against Golurk, but not fairly neutral against the other ghosts. And I think Berserker is probably a better shout, given that I've already got Haunter on there. So yeah, I think let's go Berserker. I think that's a great shout. So I'll just open up another tab, just put them all in a list so I can see them all side by side, just to see if nothing stands out as being an issue. So Stunfisk, Galarian, and Ferrothorn, and Slowbro. Medicham, and Haunter, and Berserker. So now I've got the 6 things. I think at this point it's nice to go through and just think about what the meta is, and just make sure I've got plenty of counters there. So steel types, I've got take on steel types. I've got Stunfisk, I've got Ferrothorn, I've got Slowbro, I've got Medicham. So I'm set against various steel types. Against fighting types, I've got Slowbro, Medicham, and Haunter. So there's options there. Perhaps a little weak to fighting types, but I think the options.
Yeah, would you have in 3 steel types? Fighting types might be a problem.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those though where I think I'm unlikely to run. Well, I'll certainly not run all 3 steel types together. That'd be some sort of death wish. But yeah, I think I'd be unlikely to run even 2 steel types together, perhaps. And if I did, I think it's certainly something I'd have to be aware of that fighting type weakness. So I think you'd perhaps have to run, if I was running double steel, I perhaps wouldn't want to run it with Medicham, because I wouldn't want I wouldn't want to rely on my fighting type to be the fighting type counter. Certainly not when the opposing's fighting type could well be Medicham, because all of a sudden then Medicham's not a counter, it's a mirror.
Yeah.
So yeah, perhaps a little weak to fighting, but as long as you're aware of that, I don't think it's too much of an issue. And you can use it to your advantage as well. So as you say, your opponent might look at my team and think, wow, he's got 3 things weak to Medicham, and he's got the mirror as well. So it can make your opponent's team a little bit easier to read if your team is a little bit off balance, like this one is. So there's that. So that's a potential positive to the negative as well. So I'm quite okay with that. Ghost types. Now there's not a great deal of ghost type counters out there. I think, as you say, in Berserker, I think I've probably got just about the best one, with the exception of Girafarig. And then if you split the ghost types down further than that, Slowbro and Haunter take on Marowak nicely, because then Marowak isn't doing ghost type fast move damage, which gives Slowbro and Haunter the edge on it. Things like Drift Blim, and it's a flying type, so Stunfisk will be able to take it on with Rock Slide. It's probably not a great matchup, but it'll do. And then I've also got Thunder on Ferrothorn if needed. So there's that, an ice punch on Medicham. So there's an ice beam on Slowbro. So there's everything on my team has got something to hit. Triple him super effectively, which is a nice coincidence. It wasn't something that I'd planned by any means, but that's nice. So I'm not too scared of triple him as long as it doesn't get a massive energy lead on me. Dusclops would be the big one that I'd be scared of. I wonder how Berserker does against that.
I think it wins, but narrowly.
Oh, so the sim I'm looking at, if assuming Dusclops doesn't bait, it's showing quite a comfortable win for Berserker actually.
That's interesting because with Fire Punch, you'd have thought Dusclops might have had a bigger edge than that.
It's much closer if the so Fire Punch is 40 energy and Shadow Punch is 35. It looks to me, looking at the sims, it looks like if the Dusclops can get a Shadow Punch bait, that'll allow it to get to a second Fire Punch, which makes it a lot closer. Berserker still comes out on top, but it's much closer. Yeah, even with a bit of an energy lead, Dusclops only wins in shields down. So yeah, I think having something that beats Dusclops is in two shields is absolutely massive. It might be that I see a Dusclops on my opponent's team, and as you say, it's quite well known in Sinister Cup as being a really good save switch. So bringing Berserker in the back would be a potential strategy I might employ there to sort of counter switch into the Dusclops save switch. And I'd rather use something like Berserker for that than Bastiodon, which is what I was using first time round, because I mean Berserker is still weak to fighting types, but it's not stranded versus them. You know, Bastiodon stranded.
Yeah, if you come out of your Berserker Ghost matchup with a little bit of energy, you've obviously got some close combats to be able to fight back against the fighters. If you go in with a Bastiodon and come out with a little bit of energy, you're not going to do that much to the fighters. You're going to get counted down, and they're going to have a massive energy advantage going into the next.
Yeah, and that sort of forward thinking is also worth considering, because it's great if you can beat something one-on-one, don't get me wrong, but if you're then going to be farmed down by the next thing that can potentially fire off massive, like certainly in this cup, things like Medicham and or Hydro Pump Polyrath, which are out there, you don't want to be giving those things energy, and you know things like Marowak. You don't want to be letting Marowak get 3 fire spins off to counter you down, because we're almost at a Shadow Ball then, and there ain't anything that's wanting to take a Shadow Ball. So trying to think beyond the initial 1v1 matchup where we can is a good way to plan. I think I don't know. So obviously we're in Sorcerer's Cup at the minute. Have you played about with Kangaskhan at all in Sorcerer's Cup? Because I think that's a good example.
No, I haven't at all. I haven't come across one against or run one myself.
Right. So I think Kangaskhan's a good example of this, where if you get it in the right matchup, it's great, because it'll mud slap down the dark poisons, but it's just got nothing. It's got no sort of threat at all for the next thing. So even in the best case scenario, you're getting it up against something that you want to get it up against, and it's beating something. But then if your opponent brings Noctowl in after that, you're done for, because Noctowl's just going to farm you down and get a load of energy and throw sky attacks at you for days. So yeah, it's thinking that way ahead is certainly something that's worth doing when and where you can. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good start. I think in a monthly meta, as the month goes on, things change, don't they? And you get to practice and you'll probably figure out weak points in your team. But I think that's perhaps a good starting point for a team. So I think I'd be pretty pleased with that going into a practice tournament or something like that. Yeah, grand. Well, let's leave it there then. Let's not go on too long. Thanks for coming on and thanks for helping.
Thank you very much for having me.
I think there's a Sinister Cup coming up soon in gym.
Yes.
So I'll probably run this team, see how it goes, or maybe make 1 or 2 adjustments to it, maybe some moveset changes, or I don't know. But yeah, I think we'll see how it goes. Thanks again. Catch you later.
See you again.